Hello students, so today's lecture is about the ulnar nerve and the intrinsic muscles of hand. So starting with the ulnar nerve. Now how is the ulnar nerve formed? Ulnar nerve, as you all remember from brachial plexus, it is a continuation of the medial cord of the brachial plexus, and it uh, initially lies on the medial aspect of the axillary artery in the interval between the axillary artery and the axillary vein, and the medial cutaneous nerve of the forearm, it lies on a comparatively more anterior plane, so it begins in the axilla. Okay, from axilla it will travel down the arm, and initially it is lying in the anterior compartment of the arm. So this is the ulnar nerve. Here in the upper part it is lying in front of this medial intermuscular septum. However, somewhere in the middle of arm, roughly at the level of insertion of coracobrachialis muscle, it will pierce the medial intermuscular septum and enter the posterior compartment of the arm. Till now, it has given no branch yet. Right, so if I just switch to the 3D model, yes, and here if we zoom in to this thing, now we are seeing roughly near the shoulder region. Here only the medial cord is being shown. This is the ulnar nerve. Here it has formed. Here it is lying medial to the axillary artery, and it is uh, it is lying in the anterior compartment of the arm. This structure in the green color is the medial intermuscular septum. Now you will see that it has pierced the medial intermuscular septum along with something called as the superior ulnar collateral artery, right? And it enters the posterior compartment of the arm, right? If I make this medial intermuscular septum transparent, then you will see, yeah, now you will see that it is traveling along with this superior ulnar collateral artery, and it reaches an area on the posterior aspect of what is this part of humerus called as, this is the medial epicondyle. So here it is lying on the posterior aspect of the base of the medial epicondyle. Here it is very superficial and it is covered only by the skin and the subcutaneous fascia. Here it is prone to injuries, as well as it can be excited by just a knock on this part of the medial epicondyle. That is why it is referred to as the funny bone. The funny bone is actually not a bone, but the subcutaneous part of the ulnar nerve, where it is lying posterior to the base of the medial epicondyle, right? Okay, now you will see that it is passing after here this region is also called as the cubital tunnel, because it is going to pass between the two heads of this muscle. I made this transparent. Let us make this thing opaque. This is the flexor carpi ulnaris muscle. This is its humeral head and this is its ulnar head. So between the two heads of the flexor carpi ulnaris, the this ulnar nerve passes through to enter the forearm, right? Here it is going to give branches to the elbow joint, some articular branches, and then the muscular branches in the forearm will be given to, obviously, the flexor carpi ulnaris, plus this is which muscle? Flexor digitorum profundus, but only its medial half will be supplied by the ulnar nerve, right? Then it travels down. In the upper one third of forearm, there is a significant gap between the ulnar artery and the ulnar nerve. However, in the lower two-third of the forearm, the ulnar nerve is accompanied by the ulnar artery on its radial side, and then it reaches this part, the wrist, and in the wrist or in the hand, it passes superficial to the flexor retinaculum, right? So it does not pass through the carpal tunnel. Carpal tunnel would be the space lying deep to the flexor retinaculum, through which the long flexor tendons of the hand pass, and the median nerve also passes through carpal tunnel. But ulnar nerve does not pass through carpal tunnel, but it passes through something called as the Guyon's canal, which is formed by the superficial palmar carpal ligament, right? And it has been removed here, but the main point is that ulnar nerve is passing superficial to the flexor retinaculum. And uh, before reaching here, it gives two branches. One is about 5 to 7 centimeters proximal to the wrist. It gives dorsal cutaneous branch. You can see this green colored branch. Which area is this going to supply? It passes on the posterior aspect of hand, and it supplies the posterior or the dorsal aspect of medial part of the hand and the medial 1.5 fingers up to their either the proximal phalanx in case of the little finger, or this the proximal and the middle phalanges in case of the ring finger. Whereas another branch that is given before entering the hand that has not been shown here is the palmar cutaneous branch of ulnar nerve, that is given somewhere here, and that will also pass superficial to the flexor retinaculum, and that is going to supply the skin over the proximal part of the hypothenar eminence. What are the thenar and hypothenar eminences? We will come to that just a short while from now. And then the ulnar nerve divides into something called as a superficial branch and a deep branch. These are the terminal branches of the ulnar nerve, so they are called as the superficial terminal branch and the deep terminal branch. Now superficial terminal branch is going to supply what? Your palmar aspect of the medial 1.5 digits. That is, it gives two branches. One is this proper palmar digital nerve for the ulnar aspect of the little finger, and it gives this common palmar digital nerve that divides into these proper palmar digital nerves for the radial aspect of little finger and for the ulnar aspect of the ring finger, all through till their tips, plus the this dorsal aspect of the proximal and middle phalanges for the ring finger, and the dorsal aspect of terminal phalanx of the little finger as well, right? And plus this common palmar digital nerve, this receives a communicating branch from the medial most common palmar digital branch of the median nerve also, right? This is that communicating branch. All right, now coming back to our PowerPoint. Right, so we know the course of ulnar nerve now. What was the origin of ulnar nerve? I did not talk about the root value. The ulnar nerve chiefly carries what? The fibers of C8 and T1, because it is a continuation of the medial cord, but it also might be having fibers of C7 which reach it how? Via a communicating branch from the medial from the median nerve, and those fibers of C7, if present in the ulnar nerve, they usually supply the flexor carpi ulnaris, right? Okay, so then, what are the branches of the ulnar nerve? We have already talked about three kinds of branches. Muscular branches will be obviously motor in nature and supplying muscles. Cutaneous branches are sensory in nature and they are going to supply the skin. Articular branches are also sensory in nature, they supply the joints. And vascular branches, they carry sympathetic postganglionic fibers and they help in controlling the diameter of the blood vessels. Right, so this is the branch tree of the ulnar nerve. We see the origin is as the continuation of medial cord. It contains C8 and T1 fibers. In the axilla, no branches are given. In the upper arm, uh, almost no branches are given. Just in the lower part of the arm, articular branches to the elbow joint will be given. Then in the forearm, what muscular branches will be given? We have already talked. Muscular branches to the flexor carpi ulnaris and to the medial half of flexor digitorum profundus. Plus, we have already talked about palmar cutaneous branch that is given just proximal to the wrist, and the dorsal cutaneous branch or the posterior cutaneous branch for the dorsal aspect of the hand that is given 5 to 7 centimeters proximal to the wrist. Then also vascular branches to the ulnar artery are also given. Even here you can write that vascular branches to the axillary artery as well as the brachial artery are also given by the ulnar nerve. That can also be written here. And then uh, in the lower part of forearm or in the proximal part of hand, some articular branches are also given to the wrist joint. Then in the hand, we have done that the ulnar nerve divides into its two terminal branches, the superficial terminal branch and the deep terminal branch. So superficial terminal branch, I had talked about that it was meant for the medial part of hand, not medial part of hand, for medial 1.5 fingers. Medial part of hand is supplied by the palmar cutaneous branch, but the medial 1.5 digits are supplied by the superficial terminal branch of ulnar nerve. But superficial branch also supplies one subcutaneous muscle in the hand that is called as the palmaris brevis. We will show you that subsequently. Plus the deep terminal branch that is going to supply most of the intrinsic muscles of hand. We will first discuss the intrinsic muscles of hand, then we will see which muscles are supplied by ulnar nerve and which are supplied by the median nerve. Right, so this is just the details, okay, in the forearm, in axilla and upper arm, what branches are being given, in forearm, what branches are being given, and in the hand, what branches are being given. Right, so again, this is the cutaneous nerve supply. So in the hand, if we see this area, the proximal part of the hypothenar eminence is supplied by the palmar cutaneous branch, which was given in the forearm, whereas the distal part of the hand and the medial 1.5 fingers, we are talking about the palmar aspect or anterior aspect or the ventral aspect of hand. So the distal part of hand and distal part of palm of hand and the palmar aspect of medial 1.5 fingers, that is being supplied by the superficial terminal branch, which gives these palmar digital branches. First, the proper palmar digital branch for medial aspect of little finger, and the common palmar digital branch which gives the proper palmar digital branches for lateral aspect of little finger and for medial aspect of the ring finger. Whereas if we talk about the dorsal aspect of the hand, the proximal part of dorsal aspect of hand is supplied by the dorsal cutaneous branch that was given 5 to 7 centimeter proximal to the wrist, whereas the distal part of dorsal aspect of hand and the dorsal aspect of the fingers, only the proximal phalanx in case of the middle finger, no, ring finger, and the proximal and middle phalange in case of little finger, they are supplied by the again this dorsal cutaneous branch, whereas the terminal part of dorsal aspect of the medial 1.5 digits, that is supplied by the palmar digital branches, because these parts of the digits are derived embryologically from the palmar aspect. Then this is the cubital tunnel on the posterior aspect of medial epicondyle. The ulnar nerve might be entrapped here, may be compressed here. It may undergo something called as compression neuropathy. Then various motor and sensory symptoms might arise if the nerve is, entrapped here, where it is passing between the two heads of the flexor carpi ulnaris. This area is called as the cubital tunnel, right? Then it passes in the hand, it passes through something called as this area. Now you see, this is the flexor retinaculum. It has been cut away, but even uh, superficial to the flexor retinaculum, while the ulnar nerve and ulnar artery are passing, they are covered anteriorly by this ligament, forming something called as the Guyon's canal. So even though the ulnar nerve is not passing through the carpal tunnel, it is still passing through a fibro-osseous canal that is called as the Guyon's canal. So it might undergo compression neuropathy in the Guyon's canal as well. And after passing through Guyon's canal, it divides into its two terminal branches, and which are the superficial terminal branch and the deep terminal branch, right? Okay, so another clearer view of the Guyon's canal here. So, the Guyon's canal, where does it lie? On the lateral aspect of the pisiform bone, right? Whereas this deep branch of ulnar nerve, that is going to pass uh, in relation to the hook of hamate. Okay, right. And this deep branch of ulnar nerve, one thing you should know is that it lies in the concavity of the deep palmar arch of the hand. If you must have been already told about the palmar arches, the superficial palmar arch and the deep palmar arch. So deep palmar arch is lying in deep to the long flexor tendons in the hand, in the this mid palmar space. Right. So here the deep branch of ulnar nerve lies in the concavity of this deep palmar arch. Right. Okay. So this is again displaying the this palmar cutaneous branch. Here we see that ulnar nerve and ulnar artery, they are passing through Guyon's canal. This is the palmar branch of ulnar nerve, which was given proximal to the wrist, and similarly palmar branch of median nerve. So palmar branch of median nerve, palmar branch of ulnar nerve, they are all passing superficial to the flexor retinaculum. Even ulnar nerve and ulnar artery are also passing superficial to flexor retinaculum, but ulnar nerve and ulnar artery are passing through a canal called as Guyon's canal, whereas the palmar cutaneous branch of ulnar nerve as well as median nerve do not pass through that. Now this little muscle, this is called as the palmaris brevis, the subcutaneous muscle. Here we have reflected only the skin. You see, this is the palmar aponeurosis. This was the palmaris longus muscle. You are seeing superficially the thinner muscles. The muscles related to the thumb, they are called as the thinner muscles, whereas the muscles related to medial part of hand and related to the little finger, they are called as the hypothenar muscles. So hypothenar muscles are covered by something, this transverse muscle, that is called as the palmaris brevis. So this is also supplied by the superficial terminal branch of the ulnar nerve. So if we further remove, now we have totally removed the skin, and here now we can see the palmar cutaneous branch that is going to supply the proximal part of skin of hypothenar eminence, whereas the superficial terminal branch is going to supply palmaris brevis. It is going to supply the skin of distal part of hypothenar eminence and the medial part of the palm of hand, plus it will give a proper palmar digital branch for the medial aspect of the little finger, and it will give a common palmar digital branch which is going to supply the proper palmar digital branches for the lateral aspect of little finger and for the medial aspect of the ring finger, right? Then if we further, now we come to the intrinsic muscles of hand. Now first of all, what is the difference between intrinsic muscles and extrinsic muscles of hand? The property of being intrinsic or extrinsic depends upon where is the origin of the muscle. If there is a muscle which is taking origin outside the hand or proximal to the hand, whether in from the this medial epicondyle of the humerus or from some part of ulna. That is, the origin might be in the forearm or in the lower part of arm, but the insertion is in the hand. Those muscles are called as extrinsic muscles. Right? If I show you that first diagram, yes, now here you can see that this is the flexor digitorum profundus. This is taking origin in the forearm. It is taking origin from the ulna. Some part might be taking origin from the medial epicondyle also, but the insertion is in the on the distal phalanges of the medial four digits. So the origin is outside the hand, but insertion is inside the hand. So this is an extrinsic muscle. Same goes for flexor digitorum superficialis, flexor pollicis longus, abductor pollicis longus, extensor pollicis longus. These are all muscles which are taking origin in the forearm mostly, but inserting in the hand. So these muscles are extrinsic muscles. What are intrinsic muscles of hand? Intrinsic will be they will be taking origin also within the hand and inserting also within the hand. So the distinguishing feature between extrinsic and intrinsic muscles of hand is where their origin lies. So intrinsic muscles of hand, the origin also will be within the hand only, right? So which are the intrinsic muscles of hand? So first we have the thenar muscles or the thenar compartment or the lateral compartment, which has total of three muscles. We have the abductor pollicis brevis, we have the flexor pollicis brevis, and we have the opponens pollicis. Now you notice that we apply this term brevis for the abductor pollicis and flexor pollicis, but not for opponents. Why so? Because we have a longus muscle of the same name. We have an abductor pollicis longus also, which was taking origin in the posterior compartment of forearm. So it is a comparatively longer muscle. It has a greater length. So we call that as abductor pollicis longus. That is an extrinsic muscle of hand. But we have a comparatively shorter muscle doing the same function, causing the abduction of the thumb. So this one is called as abductor pollicis brevis. Brevis term comes from brevity or being brief or meaning its length is short. So because we have an abductor pollicis longus, that is why we need to call the corresponding shorter muscle as abductor pollicis brevis. Same goes for flexor pollicis brevis. We have a flexor pollicis longus also, which is one of the muscles of flexor compartment of forearm. That is also causing flexion of the thumb, but we have an intrinsic muscle of the thumb also, which is causing its flexion. So we need to call that as flexor pollicis brevis. But opponens pollicis, we have only one muscle. We have no corresponding extrinsic muscle which causes opposition of the thumb. So we have only a single muscle causing opposition of thumb, which is the opponens pollicis, which is taking origin also within the hand and inserting also within the hand. So we do not apply any such term brevis or longus along with opponens pollicis. Sorry. So we have the three thenar muscles: abductor pollicis brevis, flexor pollicis brevis, and opponens pollicis. I will just show you these thenar muscles. Uh, Yeah, so this one is here. This is the flexor pollicis brevis. This is the abductor pollicis brevis, and they are covering under cover of these muscle lies the opponens pollicis. Similarly, we have the hypothenar muscles here, where the medial one and the lateral one will be called as the flexor digiti minimi brevis, and the lateral one will be called as abductor digiti minimi. Now, no abductor digiti minimi brevis. Why? Because there is no abductor digiti minimi longus. So, only abductor digiti minimi, only opponens digiti minimi, but flexor digiti minimi is called as brevis because there is a long flexor tendon for the little finger also. That is, those are the tendons of the flexor digitorum profundus, the medial most tendon. That is the long flexor tendon of the little finger, right? So hypothenar muscles are total three: the abductor digiti minimi, flexor digiti minimi brevis, and opponens digiti minimi. And then we have lumbrical, four lumbrical muscles. Then we have four palmar interossei. Why interossei? Because they are lying between the adjacent bones. Which bones? The metacarpal bones. So four palmar interossei take origin from the palmar aspect of the these metacarpals, whereas the dorsal interossei, they take origin from the comparatively dorsal aspect of the intermetacarpal spaces. And then we have the palmaris brevis, which we have already talked about, and then there is a muscle called as the adductor pollicis. Lot of authors include this adductor pollicis within the thenar muscle, so you can write this as one of the thenar muscles also. So total of 20 muscles, 3 muscles of the thenar eminence, 3 muscles of the hypothenar eminence, then 12 muscles consisting of 4 lumbricals, 4 palmar interossei, and 4 dorsal interossei. So plus the palmaris brevis and the adductor pollicis. So total of 20 intrinsic muscles are there in each hand. Then we will discuss their origins and insertions and their actions. Their actions are very important. So first of all, uh, we will talk about the lumbrical muscles. Now, lumbricals are special in two ways. The first way in which the lumbricals are special are that their origin is not from a bone but from a tendon. You see, these are the tendons of flexor digitorum profundus, which are passing through the tendon of flexor digitorum superficialis to distally go and insert on the distal filling. So this is the tendon of flexor digitorum profundus. You can see that the lumbrical muscles are taking origin from either one profundus tendon, the first two lumbrical. There are four lumbricals. They are numbered from lateral to medial side. This is the palmar aspect of the right hand. You are seeing this is the first lumbrical, this is second lumbrical, third lumbrical, and fourth lumbrical. So the first two lumbricals take origin only from the profundus tendon for the index finger and for the middle finger. So these are called as unipinnate because their fibers are going only in a single direction. Whereas the third lumbrical and the fourth lumbrical, they take origin from the profundus tendons for the, in case of the third lumbrical, it is taking origin from profundus tendon meant for the middle finger as well as the profundus tendon meant for the ring finger. So the third lumbrical as well as the fourth lumbrical, they are bipinnate because they are taking origin from two profundus tendons, right? And okay, this is about their muscular architecture. First two are unipinnate, third and fourth are bipinnate. Then what about their insertion? Now their insertion, you will see that they are going to, they cross the, now these are the metacarpal bones and these are the proximal phalanges. This is the metacarpophalangeal joint. So the tendon of each lumbrical crosses the metacarpophalangeal joint on its lateral aspect but also on its, comparatively on its palmar aspect. So if we show you on a lateral view, so this is the tendon of a lumbrical muscle. You will see that if this is a metacarpal, and this is a proximal filling, so the lumbrical crosses the metacarpophalangeal joint on its palmar aspect. So what will be its function on the metacarpophalangeal joint if the lumbrical muscle contracts? It will be flexion of the metacarpophalangeal joint that will lead to which, this is the flexion at the metacarpophalangeal joint. But if we see what happens further to the lumbrical tendon, it inserts into something called as the dorsal digital expansion, which is an expansion formed in the insertion of the long extensor tendons of the digit, right? So if I show you in this view, this is the long extensor tendon. Here, this is the form. This is called as the dorsal digital expansion. It consists of a central band which inserts on the base of the middle phalanx, and it has lateral bands also which go and insert on the base of the terminal phalanx. So the lumbrical is coming and inserting on the lateral aspect of the dorsal digital expansion, right? So if the lumbrical contracts, it is because it is passing on the palmar aspect of the metacarpophalangeal joint. It will cause flexion at this joint, but now it has inserted into the dorsal digital expansion. Now if it contracts, it pulls the dorsal digital expansion and its lateral bands proximally. So, what is its action on the this proximal and the distal interphalangeal joints? That is their extension. Here you can see that lumbrical has caused flexion of the MCP joint, but it causes extension of the proximal and the distal interphalangeal joints because now it has inserted into the dorsal digital expansion. Right. That is why the lumbricals help in producing this position of the finger as if you are holding a P, or for example, if you are playing a piano, you need this position of your fingers where your fingers need to be straight, but they need to be flexed as compared to your hand. So fingers are straight because of extension at the interphalangeal joints, but they are flexed with respect to hand because of flexion at the metacarpophalangeal joint. So the lumbricals, L for lumbrical, and they help in creating this L shape between the palm of the hand or between the hand itself and the fingers. Right, this is how you can remember. Right, so this is about the lumbricals. So each lumbrical inserts on the lateral aspect of the dorsal digital expansion. A very small part of the lumbricals also inserts into the proximal part of base of the proximal phalange of the respective digit on its lateral side. Right. Now, what is the nerve supply of the lumbricals? The first two lumbricals you must have studied that are supplied by the median nerve, whereas the third and the fourth lumbricals, they are one of the muscles, two of the muscles which are supplied by deep terminal branch of ulnar nerve. If we come back to the terminal branches of ulnar nerve, here now you will see this is the superficial terminal branch which was giving the cutaneous branches for medial aspect of little finger and for the adjoining surfaces of little and ring fingers. This is the deep branch. So one of the first branches, first of all, the deep branch supplies the hypothenar muscles, then it supplies the third and the fourth lumbricals, right? Whereas the first two lumbricals, they will be supplied by the median nerve. What are these branches meant for? These are meant for the interosseous muscles or for the adductor pollicis, right? Coming back to the intrinsic muscles of hand, then we come to the uh, these muscles, the interossei, right? Now here we have this is the palmar aspect of the right hand, where we can see we have the three palmar interossei. We can see that all the three interossei, palmar interossei, they are unipinnate, right? Whereas this is the dorsal aspect of the right hand, where you can see we have four dorsal interossei, the first one, second one, third one, fourth one, and all four dorsal interossei are bipinnate because they are taking origin from the adjacent surfaces of their respective metacarpal bones. Now, what is their action? Now you can remember the action of interossei via two mnemonics, pad and dab. PAD, pad, and DAB, dab. So in pad, the P stands for the palmar interossei and AD stands for adduction, right? Now we if you just revise the movements of the fingers, which is uh, the central axis which we consider for the movement of fingers, that is the axis of the middle finger or the axis of the third metacarpal and its adjoining phalanges. So this axis is considered as the central line. If any finger is moving towards this axis, that is called as adduction, whereas any finger moving away from the middle finger, that is called as abduction. So pad, palmar interossei, these three palmar interossei, AD, they cause adduction. So they cause movement of their respective finger towards the middle finger, right? So middle finger itself, whether it moves to the lateral side or whether it moves to the medial side, that is called as abduction of the middle finger. This will be called as the radial or the lateral abduction. This movement will be called as the medial or the ulnar abduction of middle finger. So the middle finger can only be abducted, that is why it only has the dorsal interossei. DAB, D stands for dorsal and AB stands for abduction. So the middle finger has only dorsal interossei which can abduct it either to the lateral side or to the medial side, but middle finger has no palmar interossei because its adduction cannot be caused. Whether it moves to this side or that side, it is abduction, not adduction. Right. So we have adductors, that is the palmar interossei, only for the index finger, the little finger, and for the the ring finger, and for the little finger. So the first palmar interosseous, that takes origin from the medial aspect of the second metacarpal and goes and inserts into the medial aspect of the proximal part of the proximal phalange, plus it inserts into the medial aspect of the this dorsal digital expansion of the index finger as well. That is why when it contracts, it will pull the index finger towards the middle finger, causing adduction of the index finger, right? And correspondingly, the second and the third palmar interossei, which are meant for the ring finger and for the little finger, they take origin from the lateral aspects of the fourth and the fifth metacarpals, and they will be inserted into the lateral aspects of bases of proximal part of proximal phalanges, right? And also on the lateral aspect of dorsal digital expansions of the ring finger and the little finger. So when they contract, they cause lateral movement of the ring finger or the little finger, that is again the adduction. So medial movement of index finger as well as lateral movement of ring and little fingers, that is called as adduction, that is brought about by the palmar interossei, which are all unipinnate and right, and all are supplied by deep branch of ulnar nerve. Then if we come to, now you might say, why is there not a palmar interosseous for the thumb? That is actually the adductor pollicis that causes adduction of the thumb, that we will be talking about later on, but that is also supplied by deep branch of ulnar nerve. So adductor pollicis may be considered as the first palmar interosseous, right? And then there are the four dorsal interossei, right? Now the dorsal interossei are DAB, D for dorsal, AB for abduction, they are going to cause abduction. So there will be two dorsal interossei meant for the middle finger. So again, they are also numbered from lateral to medial side. First dorsal interosseous, that will cause the abduction of the index finger, whereas the second and third dorsal interossei both are meant for the middle finger. The second causes the radial abduction or lateral abduction, whereas the third one causes the ulnar abduction or the medial abduction. Whereas the fourth dorsal interosseous is meant for the ring finger and it causes its abduction. Now you would say, where are the abductors of the little finger and the thumb, those are the abductor digiti minimi and the abductor pollicis brevis as well as abductor pollicis longus muscle. So the thumb and the little finger have their own abductors, so they do not have their dorsal interossei, right? So just like palmar interossei, dorsal interossei also insert partly into the corresponding side of the base of the proximal phalanx, either the lateral side in case of the first two interossei, or on the medial side in case of the third and the fourth dorsal interossei. Plus they also insert into the corresponding side of the dorsal digital expansion of the corresponding digit. So the first dorsal interosseous as well as the second dorsal interosseous, they insert into the lateral aspect of dorsal digital expansion of index finger or the middle finger, whereas the third and fourth dorsal interosseous, they insert into the medial aspect of dorsal digital expansion of the middle finger or the ring finger respectively. So all you need to remember the origin and insertion of the palmar and dorsal interossei, you just remember the mnemonic pad and dab. P for palmar, AD for adduction, D for dorsal, AB for abduction. And the second thing that you should remember is that the middle finger cannot be adducted, so it has no palmar interossei. Middle finger, because it can be abducted in either direction, so it has two dorsal interossei. That is all you need to remember. You then you can just deduce from which side of the metacarpal the interosseous will take origin and on which side of the proximal phalanx or which side of the dorsal digital expansion of that particular digit it will insert. You just need to remember with that we have palmar interossei for adduction of index finger, ring finger and little finger, whereas we have dorsal interossei meant for abduction of index finger, then radial abduction and ulnar abduction of middle finger, and for the abduction of the little finger, none for the thumb and the little fingers, right? And all the interossei are supplied by the deep branch of ulnar nerve, right? Okay. Now coming to just revising the movements of the muscle, I will just revise that movement of the thumb in the plane of palm, that is flexion and extension. If you move the thumb within the plane of palm, medially that is the flexion and laterally that is the extension of thumb. Whereas if you move the thumb away from plane of palm, that is called as abduction, and if you move it towards the plane of palm, that is called as adduction. And if you touch the this tip of the thumb to the tips of the other digits, that is called as opposition, right? Okay, so then coming to the thinner muscles, for these thinner and hypothinner muscles we will be switching to the again to the 3D model. Okay, and switching to uh, where are the thinner muscles? These are the lumbricals, the interossei, hypothenor, these are the thinner muscles. Right. Okay. So here you are seeing the thinner muscles. Now this is again the right hand, but we are seeing with the proximal part pointing up and the distal part pointing down. So this muscle, the most superficial and lateral of the muscles, this is the abductor pollicis brevis, and the medial one, that is the flexor pollicis brevis, and these two overlap this one something which is called as the opponens pollicis, right? Now you will see that the abductor pollicis brevis as well as the flexor pollicis brevis, they are taking origin from this part, so you need not remember the exact points, but roughly यहाँ पे क्या क्या है. You have the flexor retinaculum, right? You have the tubercle of scaphoid, you will have the tubercle of trapezium also, and trapezoid will be here as well. So roughly from this area they are taking origin. So from medial part of flexor retinaculum, medial aspect of palmar aponeurosis, either from tubercle of scaphoid or from tubercle of trapezium, from some part of trapezoid and even some part of capitate also. The adductor hallucis might take origin. Where are they going and inserting? The abductor pollicis brevis and the flexor pollicis brevis, they are going to insert on the lateral aspect of base of proximal phalanx of the thumb. Right, both are going to insert, and their insertion usually has a sesamoid bone that is sometimes visible on the X-ray also. Whereas this muscle, the adductor hallucis, which is the largest of the thinner muscles and the most powerful as well, if it is considered as part of thinner muscles, which most of the authors do, that inserts on the medial aspect of base of the proximal phalanx of the thumb, and its insertion also might be containing a sesamoid bone, and these two sesamoid bones, between them what passes is the tendon of flexor pollicis longus, which is again an extrinsic muscle of the hand. Right. So, and why I'm telling you all this, that abductor pollicis brevis, flexor pollicis brevis, and adductor pollicis, they all insert on the proximal phalanx of the thumb, either on its medial side or on its lateral side. Whereas the opponent's pollicis, if I remove the if I just remove this abductor pollicis and the flexor pollicis, we will see, now we see the opponent's pollicis. Opponent's pollicis is inserted throughout the length of the metacarpal of the thumb, the first metacarpal. So what is the difference is that on which joint the opponent's pollicis is going to act, that is your opponent's pollicis is going to pull the metacarpal medially. So it is going to act on the carpometacarpal joint, first carpometacarpal joint. So it helps in bringing the thumb medially. That is why it helps in causing opposition, because for opposition you need to bring the thumb medially. Whereas the rest of the three not hypo, thinner muscles, the abductor, uh, pollicis brevis, flexor pollicis brevis, and the adductor hallucis, they uh, this insert on the proximal phalanx of the thumb. So they are also going to act on the this metacarpophalangeal joint of the thumb. So they will bring either flexion or this abduction at the this metacarpophalangeal joint, in addition to the carpometacarpal joint. Right. So these are, that is about the thinner muscles. And what is their nerve supply? The abductor pollicis brevis, flexor pollicis brevis, and the opponent's pollicis, they are all supplied by the median nerve, something called as the recurrent branch of the median nerve. But the adductor hallucis, not hallucis, adductor pollicis is supplied by the deep branch of the ulnar nerve. Sometimes there is this, the flexor pollicis brevis, it consists of two heads. One is the superficial head that lies on the lateral and superficial aspect of the flexor pollicis longus tendon, that is not shown here. Let me just see if I can add that tendon here. Right, huh. So this is the flexor pollicis longus tendon. So lying superficial to it is the superficial head. There is a deep head also of the flexor pollicis brevis that has not been shown here. The deep head is sometimes supplied by the deep branch of ulnar nerve also. So that's there, right? So all the thinner muscles except adductor pollicis and deep head of flexor pollicis brevis, they are supplied by the median nerve. Then coming to the hypothenar muscles. In the hypothenar muscle, sometimes some authors include the palmaris brevis. This is the palmaris brevis, which is actually a subcutaneous muscle. I will be removing this. Plus, again, we have similar three muscles. They are, we have created sections through these muscles. This one, the lateral one out of these two is the flexor digiti minimi brevis. The medial one is the abductor digiti minimi. Again, you will see they are inserting on the medial aspect of proximal phalanx of the little finger, whereas the opponent's pollicis जो है that inserts in the medial aspect of metacarpal of the little finger, that is the fifth metacarpal. So that is different between the insertions. Origin is again from the flexor retinaculum, from the pisiform bone, then from this hamate and some part of capitate as well. Right. So that is about the hypothenar muscle. So we have talked about the lumbricals, we have talked about the interossei, and then we have talked about the thenar and the hypothenar muscles as well. Right, I will just show you the lumbricals and the interossei also here in the 3D model as well. Here you can see this is the flexor retinaculum. Deep to it, the flexor digitorum profundus tendons are passing. Flexor digitorum superficialis has not been shown here. You can see that the first lumbrical unipinnate taking origin only from lateral aspect of the FDP tendon for the index finger, going and inserting on the lateral aspect of the proximal phalanx that has not been shown, but it is inserting on the dorsal digital expansion of the index finger from its lateral side. Second lumbrical from the FDP tendon for middle finger, inserting again on the lateral aspect. Third and fourth lumbricals from FDP tendon for index and ring fingers, and FDP tendon for ring and little fingers. So both are bipinnate. So these two are supplied by the deep branch of ulnar nerve, whereas these two are supplied by the branches from the median nerve. Then if I show you the interossei, these are the interossei. So all the three palmar interossei shown in purple, all three are unipinnate from taking origin from either medial aspect of second metacarpal or from the lateral aspects of fourth and fifth metacarpals. So but all three will bring about adduction. Pad, palmar interossei, AD adduction. First palmar interosseous, which is the lateralmost one, will bring adduction of the index finger, whereas the second and third palmar interossei will bring adduction of the ring finger and the little finger. There is no palmar interosseous for the middle finger because its adduction cannot be caused, but it has two dorsal interossei because it can be abducted either in the lateral direction as well as or in the medial direction as well. So first dorsal interosseous will cause abduction of the index finger. Second dorsal interosseous will cause radial abduction of middle finger. Third dorsal interosseous will cause ulnar abduction of middle finger, and fourth dorsal interosseous will cause the abduction of the ring finger. If I show you from the dorsal aspect, you can see that all four dorsal interossei are bipinnate, taking origin from, in case of first dorsal interosseous, from the medial aspect of first metacarpal and lateral aspect of second dorsal interosseous from medial aspect of second metacarpal and lateral aspect of third metacarpal, third dorsal interosseous from medial aspect of third metacarpal, lateral aspect of fourth metacarpal, and fourth dorsal interosseous from medial aspect of fourth metacarpal and lateral aspect of the fifth metacarpal. And their insertions are accordingly so designed that they will cause abduction of the any corresponding digit that they insert on. Right. So we have the interossei as well. Okay. Now, do we have anything left? Now, again, we will come to the ulnar nerve and we will just see its course and its branches in the hand again. Right. So the superficial branch, we had seen that it was supplying the palmaris brevis. I will remove it, and it was supplying the medial aspect of little finger and the corresponding aspects of the adjacent aspects of the little and the ring fingers. I will remove the superficial branch also now. This, no. Right, okay. Now, this is the superficial palmar arch, which is a continuation of the ulnar artery. I will remove this thing also, because how do we know? The palmar arch which lies superficial to the long flexor tendons, that is the superficial arch. The one which lies deep to the long flexor tendons, that is the deep palmar arch. We will just remove the superficial palmar arch. I will remove the hypothenar muscles also. Flexor digiti minimi brevis gone, abductor digiti minimi gone, then opponens digiti minimi gone. Now you are starting to see the deep branch of ulnar nerve, right? And we can see that it passes uh, across the hook of hamate and enters the concavity of the deep palmar arch. This thing is the deep palmar arch, and here it will supply all the palmar interossei, all the dorsal interossei. It will supply the third and fourth lumbricals also, which you see here. These are the, this is the fourth lumbrical, this is the third lumbrical. They are supplied by deep branch of ulnar nerve. If I remove these two, we will see that then we have these are the palmar interossei will be here. This one is the, okay, this is the dorsal interosseous. This one is the palmar interosseous for adduction of the little finger. There will be palmar interosseous for adduction of the ring finger, and there will be palmar interosseous for adduction of the index finger. These are all supplied by deep branch of ulnar, and all the dorsal interossei supplied by deep branch of ulnar, plus the adductor hallucis, this one in purple, that is also supplied by the deep branch of ulnar nerve. Now, what I have not told you is that adductor hallucis is also consisting of two heads. One is the transverse head and one is the oblique head. The oblique head is coming from the these carpals and the basal part of the second and the third metacarpals, whereas the transverse head comes from the distal part and the middle part of the third metacarpal, but they in the end they unite and insert on the medial aspect of base of the proximal phalanx with a sesamoid bone in their insertion. Right. Okay. Then coming back to the PPT. Let me switch back to the PPT. Right. Okay. So we have talked about this movements of hand. So this is just again telling you about the muscle, roughly where is its origin, where is it's inserted, what is its nerve supply, what are the nerve roots of uh, the fibers, which spinal segments the fibers are coming in that nerve, and what is its action. So palmaris brevis we had not talked about. It just corrugates the skin of, especially of the hypothenar eminence, so it just helps in improving the strength of the grip, right? And lumbricals we have already talked about what is their function. Interossei we have already talked about what is their function, and then now supply the origin and insertions you can see from here from the table. This is the same thing. Now then, what is about the ulnar nerve? Ulnar nerve, you should know what is its origin, what nerve fibers it carries, from which spinal nerve roots, that is C8 T1 might also carry from C7. Then you should know its course. Then you should know where it might be affected by injury or by compression, and what will be the consequences of those respective compressions. So the three areas where the ulnar nerve might get affected, it might get affected here at the level of thoracic outlet, at the level of the trunks of the brachial plexus, where they are coming out from the neck and they are entering the upper limb. So just above the first rib, they might be compressed by a cervical rib. They might be compressed by a hypertrophied scalenus medius or scalenus anterior muscle. They might be compressed by an aneurysm of the subclavian artery. So whatever might be the reason, if trunks of brachial plexus are compressed here at the thoracic outlet, if the lower trunk is involved, then it might affect the ulnar nerve. That is part of the thoracic outlet syndrome. Then cubital tunnel here on the posterior aspect of medial epicondyle, when it passes between the two heads of flexor carpi ulnaris, that is called as cubital tunnel syndrome. Please do not confuse it with carpal tunnel syndrome. Carpal tunnel syndrome was compression of median nerve deep to the flexor retinaculum. So carpal tunnel syndrome involves median nerve, whereas cubital tunnel syndrome involves the ulnar nerve. And then there is the ulnar tunnel syndrome, that is compression of the ulnar nerve within the Guyon's canal. So if we just have to differentiate, so if there is thoracic outlet syndrome, if the lower trunk is involved, that is going to involve the ulnar nerve, but it is also going to involve your medial and cutaneous nerves of arm and forearm. So all the muscles supplied by ulnar nerve will be paralyzed, plus there will be pain in the area of supply of the medial cutaneous nerve of arm, medial cutaneous nerve of forearm. Whereas if ulnar nerve is involved in the cubital tunnel, then there will be no pain here. Medial cutaneous nerve of arm or forearm, there will be no pain in areas of their distribution. What will happen is there will be paralysis of flexor carpi ulnaris. So, if we try to ask the patient to flex their wrist, then they will be able to flex their wrist because of flexor carpi radialis, which is supplied by the median nerve, but the wrist will be correspondingly abducted. There will be radial abduction of the wrist along with its flexion because of unopposed action of flexor carpi radialis. So the wrist will be, abducted also along with flexion, right? And then there will be, and if you ask them to adduct their wrist, will they be able to do that? Because flexor carpi radialis helps in abduction of the wrist, but extensor carpi radialis also helps in abduction. So adduction also correspondingly flexor carpi ulnaris, okay, that is paralyzed, but the extensor carpi ulnaris, that will be still working because of its supply by the radial nerve. So adduction of the wrist will be possible, but on asking the patient to flex the wrist, there will be correspondingly abduction of the wrist. Right. And then there is, if the ulnar tunnel syndrome, if in the Guyon's canal the ulnar nerve is paralyzed, then the flexor carpi ulnaris and the flexor digitorum profundus, the medial half, which gives tendons for the little finger and the ring finger, they will be spared because the ulnar nerve has already given its branches to them in the forearm, and it is compressed here. So all any branches that will be given distal to this part, those will be involved. Now coming back to the, yes, now if the ulnar nerve is involved in Guyon's canal, then the Palmar cutaneous branch will not be paralyzed. So the skin on proximal part of hypothenar eminence will retain its sensory perception, whereas the skin on the distal aspect of the medial aspect of hand and the skin of this medial 1.5 digits, they will either lose their nerve supply, or there will be pain and tingling depending upon the this degree of compression of the ulnar nerve. Point is that if in the Guyon's canal ulnar nerve is involved, the Palmar cutaneous branch as well as the dorsal cutaneous branch, which was meant for the dorsal aspect of medial part of hand and medial 1.5 digits, those are spared. So, an experienced neurologist can check for sensation here versus here. So, if this sensation is gone or there is pain here, but this sensation is retained, then there will you can deduce that there is compression of the ulnar nerve in the Guyon's canal, right? Okay, and then there is something called as the claw hand. That happens because of the paralysis of the lumbrical muscles. So now one thing I have not told you is that ulnar nerve is also called as musician's nerve. Why? Because most of the intrinsic muscles of hand, other than these three thinner muscles, all the other intrinsic muscles of hand are supplied by the ulnar nerve, specifically by the deep branch of ulnar nerve, and those intrinsic muscles of hand are very important for playing musical instruments, whether they are stringed instruments like the guitar or the violin, or playing the flute or the saxophone, where you have to push on those tiny levers which open or close the holes of those instruments, or to uh, press the strings of the guitar or the violin uh, against those metallic strips. And so that is why, for the intricate control of the fingers for playing musical instruments, the ulnar nerve is called as the musician's nerve, whereas median nerve, because it is supplying most of the muscles of the forearm, which are required for movement of the hand and movement of the forearm for rough movements, which are not very intricate movements, which are important in case of physical labor. That is why the median nerve is called as the laborer's nerve. Right. Now, what is clawing of hand? Clawing is this movement where your metacarpophalangeal joint is extended, but your interphalangeal joints are flexed in the form of a claw. Right. So we have to remember that this is a passive sign. This is the resting position of the patient's hand. You are not asking them to do anything. You are not asking them to make a fist. Remember about the pointing index finger. In case of median nerve paralysis, that is an active sign. The normal resting position of the hand is normal in that case, but if you ask the patient to make a fist, then their index finger and their middle finger will not flex, whereas their little and the ring fingers, they will get flexed towards making a fist. So that is the difference between an active sign and a passive sign. Active sign is present only when the patient tries to make a fist, whereas passive sign is patient is not even trying to do anything. That is the resting positions of their hand. So this, if this is the resting position of a patient's hand, then it will be called as a clawing, the ulnar clawing. Whereas if this is what happens when you ask the patient to make a fist, in that case the little and the ring fingers will flex slightly more, but these two remain unflexed. That is a pointing index finger. That this would happen in case of a median nerve paralysis, if this happens when the patient is trying to make a fist. But if this happens, this position happens to be in case the patient is not trying to make a fist, and this is the resting position of the patient's hand, that is called as the clawing or the ulnar clawing. Right. So that is the difference between the clawing, and I will be discussing a little bit more about clawing in the demo video of the intrinsic muscles of hand and the ulnar. Right. So, yeah, thank you.